Oh, welcome everybody back to Tracklandia. It is Thursday, February 1st. We're in, is it a leap year, Burnsy?
Think so. Yeah, it's not one of those weird multiples of four where you actually skip the leap year like every 100 years or something like that. I think it's a bona fide leap year.
A bona fide leap year. That means 29 days in February, right? Good.
Yeah.
Let's take advantage of all 29 of them. Pack the Strava miles in this month.
Ooh, so many.
Little less than,
Pat.
yeah, pad the stats, build that orange fence. Uh, but this is a talk about the Marathon Olympic trials in Orlando that'll be taking place this Saturday, 2 days from now. The race will be over in 48 hours. Well, less than that. So we hope that this catches you before that, and you can get this rundown of this is actually going to be how to view the race, I would say. So we have a prediction contest going with prizes from Bandit Running, and you should definitely get in on that at trackland.com. Pick your top 5 men and women finishers for the trials, and then win prizes beyond your wildest dreams. Bandit Running gear. I'm wearing a sweatshirt right now that's very comfortable, and it's got this. Can you see that logo there?
Yeah, it looks good. It's
Yeah,
really
I like the placement. It's kind of like,
yeah.
hey, what's it doing down there? And then you like it.
Yeah. And it satisfies World Athletics logo restriction rules. It looks like to me, size.
Good.
So you could race in that.
People can race in this down in Orlando in the heat. It's supposed to be 60 degrees, balmy down there. We'll see. I mean, you'll tell us how that affects the runners later on. But yes, let me do a quick introduction for you. I'm joined by Geoff Burns, who is, let me run down your accolades here. You're a doctor of kinesiology and exercise sciences, master of biomechanical and biomedical engineering, an excellent endurance athlete in your own right, too. 100K road champion, I believe, and a former teammate of mine at the University of Michigan, where we shared many good runs um, and great nights too. That would have given us better runs had we not had them.
Yeah, the ratio of good runs and great nights, they're sometimes mutually exclusive, but sometimes not. And I think when there's overlap there, we won that part of the Venn diagram.
We had some wins. We had some, yeah, there were some wins out there. Uh, but yeah, so Burnsy, I called you up last week, and well, I actually sent you an email first, and I said, hey, like, I'm trying to figure out how to think about this race because it's not very often that we get championship racing, and this is the kind of race that carries a ton of meaning for the people involved, and it should mean something to us too because like I just said, it's not very often that we get to see this kind of championship racing over the marathon distance. Most marathons are paced races, and we share a love for the championship style. It's just pure, and it's the real game being played. Because in a paced race, yeah, you go out there and you're just following the rabbit for as long as you can, and then maybe you drop off. But in championship racing, you have to assess each individual set of skills and how they will use them against the field and their set of skills, and when that's going to happen. And moves that are being made in the race are aimed to put people at risk and not to assist them in getting to a time. So, um, yeah, explain your love for championship racing to the people because we could talk about it all day.
Yeah, it's 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 uncontrolled and it's volatile, right? There's interactions between the organisms the whole way, the organisms being the racers, right? It's an ecosystem. And it's like the every step and every decision um can affect anything over the course of the race. And I think a lot of those things, especially if athletes are forced to make decisions and actions early in the race, like these things, carry interest on them. And so any of that volatility or stuff that happens anywhere before the first 30K, right? It creates these like nonlinear chaotic interactions that just make the end so much more unknown, and beautiful. And I think it pulls what the inevitable conclusion of that is the athletes oftentimes have to go somewhere where they're either not prepared to go or weren't expecting to go. And so you really see that, the rawness of it. It's just, in its purest sense, it's unpredictable. Whereas like a paced marathon is, it's like a 10K that athletes are just tired for. It's like you spend 30K exhausting them and then they race. And that's fine. It might even be slightly more entertaining than like a road 10K. But it's not, you don't have the volatility. And moreover, I think it favors, that dramatically favors certain types of athletes, where if you know it's going to be exactly this for 30 kilometers of the race, 3/4 of the race, you plan accordingly. And I think it again very much favors athletes with that. Moreover, it favors certain athletes that are well suited to that pace. Whereas, you can't, if an athlete maybe isn't ready to run that, but they could run the race in a different way and have a better shot at winning. They don't, it really essentially neuters them and cuts their legs out from under them, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, there are
So yeah,
incentives there that wouldn't be there in a championship race. I like that it places the responsibility in every athlete's hands to make something happen to shift the race in their favor, as
right.
opposed to just, yeah, we all know how this is going to go. Let's see who can last the longest.
Yep. It'd be like going to a concert and just hearing like, great band playing, and it's like the first, say they're playing a 15 song set. It's like the first 12 songs are just covers, And it's like, whereas, if you have like just a really good, you're wanting to go see like a really good rock band, and you just get 15 songs of just like face shredding guitar solos that are coming out of nowhere. You're hearing all new stuff. Yeah,
I think
it's
even it might be just that you're hearing the same
the
song
same
12
song.
times.
it's uh,
All right,
you
we're going to play it again.
it's like we're going to an Eddie Money concert and he's going to play 2 Tickets to Paradise 12 times in a row before moving into some jazz. Whereas, like, I mean, if you got to hear Eddie Money play 15 jazz songs, that could be, I don't know what to expect with that. That would
Yeah.
be wild.
That's like that John Mulaney bit where he went to a bar and played "What's Up, Pussycat" like 20 times in a row. That's basically a paced marathon.
Yes.
Not to say that they are not noble attempts,
Mm-hmm.
because it is great to see what the body can do, but a lot of times you're just kind of searching the results at the end to see what happened, because watching it is, like you said, like essentially just watching somebody get tired for a long time. But
Mm-hmm.
this is the real game, and I think this is why we love sports. This is why I love sports. We're both big team rooting people. So I mean, the Michigan Wolverines won it all
Go
this
blue.
year. Go blue! And I think there's something special about hitching your wagon to something and just riding that wave of emotions and putting everything into it. I think to non-sports fans, it seems weird to do that. You're like, why do you care so much about this? But I think it's an outlet in a lot of ways too, because as human beings, we have these feelings that we don't want to expend on things that matter. So it's good to use them on things that don't matter and you can just check out of afterwards. But while you're watching this race, I would say hitch your wagon to someone, saddle up, yeah, pick a horse, take the ride, and go all in with them, because there's nothing better than having a rooting interest in something like this.
Yeah. And the cool thing about this race, different from, I mean, we don't really have championship races in America outside of this, because the incentive structure in professional marathoning I would say, backwards, or does not really foster good racing for Americans. Maybe the subject of a later podcast.
Yeah.
But for for the, for the purpose of this, the cool thing about it is, like, you have two levels of stakes and rooting here. One is to see those athletes making their dream, right? Like, everybody here is chasing the dream of being an Olympian. That's like, that's that underpins so much of sport and the motivation for these athletes from their entire career, right? Like, we know, it's like, before we know sport, we know the Olympics, or like that. It's like this thing that totally transcends sport. It galvanizes nations and brings us together, and it's like, it's healthy tribalism, really, at its core.
Yes. Yeah.
um, but it anyway, so it's this huge thing. So for the athletes, it makes it very compelling for us to watch it, because the stakes are so high for them of realizing their dreams, like, putting this feather in their cap in their career, and yeah, so it's huge on that front. But on the other side, as Americans watching this is the selection of the team that we are sending to those Olympics. So it's also and especially, I would say, in my current role now with the USOPC, is like, now, we're looking at these athletes of, like, is this who's going to be our best team to go try and win medals or do really well in Paris. So I think there are really two cool levels to following the race, of, like, the dream realization of the athletes, and every single one of them brings a cool story, that would make making this team huge. And then the other level is these are our warriors that we're selecting to send into battle, right? Like, this is literally, these are the trials. So
This
these are,
is this
yeah,
is the draft.
this is the draft. So
We're drafting our best and brightest here, and they're going through the trials to figure out who's going to do it.
yeah.
I think, yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And I think, when I first emailed you, I was kicking around this idea. Well, how do we watch this thing? Because it is different, and I go back to trying to define these archetypes that we can put the different players in, so that we can see, or try to gauge how this thing might play out, in order to make predictions. But I think, what we're going to talk about isn't necessarily making predictions, but how to imagine these players in the game, how to imagine them approaching this huge race that they're about to take on, and what they might do, and what are their past tendencies. And I think I know I threw out some, like, dumb names for these categories, like Ripper, or Calculated, or an all-arounder, or something, and it just seemed kind of loose and lazy. But then you came back with a great way of thinking about it, and kind of a compass to view this race, when you're watching it and you're trying to decipher what's going on. So paint that picture for us, if you would.
Yeah, I think what you were describing to me, and what I was understanding, was fundamentally, I think, how I was also thinking of the athletes, and how we might, yeah, how I would say how marathon athletes tend to group themselves. And that's, in large respect, they are inherently, I would say, either um, aggressive or conservative, um, and they, operating on different time scales. And so for me, kind of that archetype, it to me seemed a lot more of this concept of bulls and bears that we think of in the financial sense, of a bull being, very aggressive, thinking short term, kind of going for big wins, in the, yeah, I would say, shorter time scales. Whereas the bear being okay with not making, as large of returns in the near term, with a more conservative, um, uh, long term strategy and gain, of just kind of setting and forgetting, of, like, just letting it ride. And I think marathoning, those types exist, I would say, in all running, but marathoning, I think, really kind of blows them up, because you get um, yeah, it's really an opportunity to either, you know, race volatilely and do, you know, do things with a lot more variance in your style, or be very controlled and kind of inward looking. Other races don't really, you know, shorter races don't really allow you that. It kind of, you necessarily have to be bullish on the track if you're contending for, I would say, if you're contending for medals or in races. So anyways, so I think that idea of these kind of, you know, two different, I would say, types of runners kind of emerged. And then from that, there's different, you know, different ways to be a bull or a bear. And that is, I think you can be a, you know, you're thinking of your assets and what you've got. You can spend all your coin at once and kind of go all in on, you know, one long protracted move or effort or strategy, or you can be a little bit more, you know, kind of say stochastic or uh, I would say more variable or frequent, smaller bouts. You can spend less coin in a given purchase. You make small purchases with less coin, maybe. And so that's when you get to this idea of the, you know, on the other axis, this big spender, somebody who goes all in with, you know, big moves, big purchase, or somebody who's more miserly, who spends their coin very shrewdly or in smaller quantities. And so I think you can have then, you know, thinking of these on quadrants. On one end, you can have bulls, and on one end, you can have bears, thinking on the x-axis. And then on the y-axis, you can have big spending, miserly would be the other end of that. So kind of the big spenders and the misers. So you could have a miserly bear. You could also have a miserly bull. You know, I think the quintessential miserly bear would be the athlete that just runs metronome pace the whole way. They're not only being very conservative in their strategy, they're being very I would say conservative within their conservative strategy. There's no variable spending going on there. Um, but you know, the miserly bear might be the person who sits in um, to a pack and makes maybe a lot of small, sharp moves at either throughout the race or towards the end of the race. Um, and then if we kind of work our way around that quadrant, the big spending bear might be one that either goes with the pack. You know, I think there are probably a couple ways to do this. It could be the athlete that just goes for it from the gun and just, as you would say, rides the lightning and just tries to take a big swing at it, and solos it, and maybe inevitably fades, but hopefully fades less enough that they succeed. Or it can also be an athlete that makes maybe, you know, is kind of conservative, sitting in the pack, and then just makes one big move at some point to try and get away and make it happen. Um, and I would say that it would necessarily be a sort of aggressive move of just trying to break the string. Again, then
Who?
moving around. I would say I'll just finish it by moving around the quadrant really quick. The last
All
one.
right.
The last one would be the big spending bear. So a big
Bull.
spending, or I'm sorry, I was just describing the big spending bull. Um, so moving back around to finish on the big spending bear. Now that's going to be an athlete that probably runs a pretty conservative race and makes, at some point, you know, is going to make a move. But this also might be the athlete that has a big negative split that just turns the dial up, not necessarily tries to break the string, but just gets faster and faster and faster. And with that kind of, you know, toothache, you know, puts a toothache in the rest of the field. Um, so, you know, again, it's kind of that approach of being conservative early, and then later in the race, probably just turning up the volume, turning up the volume, turning up the volume gradually. Yeah.
Because basically, from a physiological standpoint, the marathon, as you say, is all about assets, correct? like what you
Absolutely.
have and how you spend them and when. Um, so this kind of this graph that you've drawn here describes the different ways that athletes in a championship race can spend them, and there are a lot of athletes that can be plotted in different places on this quad or four quadrant graph here. Let's get back to the big spending bears because that was the last category
Yeah, yeah.
you laid out. Who was a good example of a big spending bear?
I think I'd put Galen Rupp in that category. He's somebody who runs, I would say, very, very, and well, yeah, I think I would put Rupp there. And he's one that could maybe go over to a big spending bowl sometimes, but I think more often than not, he runs intelligently, conservatively, and kind of within himself. And then, in his successful races, goes for it or responds to a move and does not he's not one to really try and snap the elastic with something really hard and aggressive. He will, extend it out and play that move out over many minutes and many miles. Um, so I would think of him as in kind of that category.
I
Um,
thought I thought about this after you described it too. After we talked about it, and I like looking at Rupp's trajectory of his career. I
mhm,
think he would be a big spending bull at the
mm,
beginning,
mm,
or maybe even a miserly bull, somebody
mhm.
who goes out on pace, but not enough to drop people, so he would get out kicked a lot.
Yeah.
But maybe throughout his career, because of that, he's turned into a big spending bear because he doesn't want to be the rabbit for the other athletes that will sit on him, and he has to make those sharp, decisive moves too in order to break himself from the field.
Yeah, and that's where I think going back between the bull and the bear, one of the ways that I think about it, um, and this is I don't know if you draw issue with this or not, but I think one of the fundamental distinctions between them is that, and this is where the marathon is unique, and you can't really do this on the track. I think the fundamental difference between them is like to me the bears are really um, racing themselves and the marathon. In of course they're racing everybody else, but they're recognizing that their best strategy is to quote unquote run their own race, to do what is optimal for their body to get to the finish line the fastest. And so they're really playing off what's going on in their own body to make their decisions and moves. Whereas the bulls, I think, are more basing their decisions off of what's going on around them, off the rest of the field. Um, and that again, that's where there's, I would say, sometimes aggression or anything like that. And again, it's like I would say a paced marathon essentially necessarily turns everybody into a bear in some sense because you're essentially dictating the script and I mean you could be a little bullish and go in over your head and try and run with a pace group. We've actually seen Connor Mance do that, but I would say broadly speaking, that's kind of how I think of them as like the bears run within themselves in order to finish highest, and then the bulls run based on what others are doing in order to finish the highest. And
So
so I
the
think getting
Bears,
back to Rupp, he's at, yeah.
oh,
So I was gonna say like Rupp necessarily like he especially early in his career like honestly on the track he's racing everybody else making decisions based on that to try and yeah win a race. He does the same thing in marathoning, but I think he has a um he has the recognition of you saw this in both of his trials races where he runs conservatively in the first part of the race and then just runs his own race really the second half of the race, which is to say much faster than everybody else, recognizing that he his best shot to make that team is to just run that long grind that he could sustain. And then I think in the Olympics in 2016, it was kind of the same, except, when the moves were made, it wasn't like it was a dramatic change to either break people or get away from people. It was just responding to the heat, and the heat literally and figuratively, as much as he could, in the way to get himself to the finish line the fastest, like rather than trying to hang with second place as long as he could, or hanging back with fourth and hoping to like break him at the end. They're just these long sustained protracted moves that he makes. And I think his other kind of paced marathons have been very similar scenarios as well. He's not the type to sit in a pack really late into a race and try and break them, nor is he the type to go in over his head early on.
Okay. So it seems like bears are maybe better accountants of their of what they have, and then bulls are a little bit emotional, perhaps.
Yeah,
They get fired up.
I think that's a good way to put it. Or yeah, maybe the bears are a little bit more concerned with cash flow. The
Yeah.
bulls are a little more willing to play fast and loose with it, recognizing that yeah, sometimes you got to spend big to win big. Not just spend big, but you gotta go all in at certain times. Yeah.
So speaking of going all in, if we move around to the big spending bulls,
Mm.
who are some prime examples of big spending bulls that we'll see on Saturday?
Yeah, and I think this is one it might be subtly different than the big spending bear, because both of them I think require moves, like these kind of like big singular moves. But again, one of them I think is in reaction to what everybody else is doing, and one of them is maybe more a with the calculated layer of like, what can I do? I think Molly Seidel to me was somebody who would kind of embody this a little bit more. She's somebody who will race, she's out to race the race. And when the move is made, she'll make it hard. And I think she and Alafine did that in the 2020 trials, whereas as opposed to, Rupp's move that was again just this long, protracted, turn up the volume just a little bit and just so much that others can't hang. Her and Alafine went hard, like pretty late in the race, to really snap that, and essentially just in a very short period, less than a mile, like again, dropped the hammer, made it happen, and tried to ride it to the end. So I think both of them kind of embodied that in that race. And her subsequent, I think her Olympic race would kind of fall into that. Um,
But
her Olympic race,
she won't
yeah,
be
I know.
racing. So
We say that, and that was like the saddest thing, just to
yeah.
hear that she will not be in the field. And I think one of the reasons it's sad is, like, I think the more and more bulls you take out of a field, the less and less um, volatile a potential marathon becomes. I think the bulls are necessary to kind of poke the bears, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so she's one that I kind of go back and forth on is Emily Sisson. Um, Actually, no, we'll get to her later, because she might be a little bit more miserly. I don't know. This is where I go back and forth, because she's made some. Yeah, I don't know. I won't use her in this category.
She's gone for it
But
though. I mean, I would put her in that category, I think.
yeah, and this is where I feel like she's inherently bearish, though. Like, she does her own thing. Like, she knows what works for her. She's like, like, you look at, I mean, her paced races where she's run really well have been essentially independent of the rest of the field, right? Like, and then, I mean, her solo artist performance last year on the track, to me, that's like, in some ways, that's almost like a, I don't know if that's a big spending bear or even a miserly bear. It's a huge move, obviously, but it's like she just went and ran exactly the race. She was independent of the rest of the field, right? Like she just ran exactly what she needed to do to make it, recognizing nobody else could hang.
Yeah, her
Um,
2021
so
10,000-meter trials race.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah. Uh, I would.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's a big spending bowl move there to go out early from the front and just hammer it hard. It's it's a
And
knowledgeable move because she knows what she has, but it's also a big one. It's
yeah, and see, that's where I actually think that's a, because she ran it so evenly, and I would say very calculated. To me, that's a very bearish move of like, to me, a bullish move, a bullish send there would be like going out really hard to break it off and basically not being able to, fading towards the end, essentially.
hmm,
Like the bullish move would be being overly aggressive to try and, break everybody. Where I think the bearish move is running exactly what you're capable of, and just saying, basically, if it's good enough, it's good enough. If it's not, it's not. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing.
hmm,
Um, so, so that's kind of where I go back and forth, because I absolutely think you're right. It's like, to see someone go out and lead a race start to finish like that seems inherently bullish, but I do think that that can be a bearish strategy if you can hang on to it, and or at least you can execute it very smoothly and well calculated.
hmm.
Um, so with that, I think that the kind of big spending bull, yeah, I definitely would have put Molly in there. I think in terms of our other women, I mean, Kira might be in that as well. She's been one that will go, she's not one that I think, she seems bullish. To me, she seems inherently bullish.
Hmm.
And she isn't one that makes, she's not waiting late and making a lot of small moves or kind of making aggressive surges early on in the race or anything like that. She is kind of that I would say inherently reading the field, reading off others, and then going all in when she needs to. Um, so I would say she might be in that.
How about
And
Mance?
yeah, I think Mance would actually move, moving around he's bullish. I think for sure we're working on that side of the quadrant. He's definitely a bull.
Hmm.
Um, and I think then the question becomes, like, I would definitely put him in, if I look at his cross country racing or something like that, he seems to me more of like that miserly bull of somebody who's taking a lot of punt or like taking a lot of swings at different points, never, any one big protracted move. The
Hmm.
problem with his marathoning career is that he does have that prototypical form of a bull of like going out above his head and like fading late and just trying not to fade as much as possible. um, and I think some of his races might be, um, was Chicago the one where he went out in 62?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to me that's a big spending bull move, right? That's just like getting out hard and saying I'm going to die, but hopefully I die close to the line.
Yeah.
um uh, so I would say that's kind of a big spending move. But again, I when I think of his like cross country archetype, to me it's like a slightly more miserly bull. Um, and I could see him taking on that form in a race that he's trying to win. Um, yeah, so I think Mance to me is like, some of his performances so far have absolutely been a kind of big spending bull, just putting his chips in and trying to hold on. Um, I could see him in a winning scenario. I think, I guess, and maybe that's what I should say is, to me, the scenario that he might win out of is if he's the more miserly bull of like, of being
Hmm.
able to be in a position to be in more control in the end of like making small aggressive moves to put it to the field. Somebody that I would then, segueing into that, I think Lenny Career to me is probably more of that miserly bull.
Hmm.
Um, Somebody who would make kind of these shorter, sharper moves. Um, uh, you look at like his trials performance. I mean, his 207, I think, came in a. I have to go back and look what his splits were from that, but I think that was a pretty controlled effort. But in the trials when he was fourth, he probably got fourth because he and I can't remember if it was he and Abdi were just kind of taking swings at each other in the late part of the race of like
Hmm.
surging, dropping, and then Jake Riley kind of scooted on by both of them because they tired themselves out basically doing that. So I think
Huh.
Lenny might be in that category. Yeah,
And then there's been a lot of talk lately about Betsy Sina too. And I've heard
yeah, yeah,
that just people I run into say Betsy Sina is very fit right now. So look out for her. And
yeah,
she's been training in Kenya. Um, from her Tokyo race where she ran 2:21, it seemed like a miserly bull effort to me. Um,
yeah,
just I would say that like there was never a point in the race where she really attacked hard. But she stayed on the front kind of, well, she was adrift from the front pack, but she stayed at the front of her own pack for a lot of the race. So just
yeah,
kind of leading the charge. But it seemed it
yep,
seemed bullish, but in more of a muted way, I suppose.
yeah, exactly. And I think her Sydney Marathon win to me, which is probably, I mean, both Tokyo and Sydney, like those are no joke. Like Tokyo obviously is a major, but it's probably not quite London, Berlin, but it's a very, very difficult, deep international field typically. Um, so, I mean, I think getting fifth there amongst those women, that's impressive. But her Sydney marathon, and this is why I would say this is almost one of the reasons I would be longer on her, is, I mean, winning a marathon is a very unique thing. And it's a very um not even to say it's a big challenge, but it is fundamentally different than it's fundamentally different than getting obviously second, third, fourth, whatever. Um because you are making very, very different decisions. You're not just trying to hang on and finish as highly as you can. You are trying to get to the line first, right? It's similar to, I would say it's very similar to like racing and cycling, of like the things that have to go right and the decisions you have to make are very, 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 very different for being, trying to be the first person versus anywhere else down the list.
That's
Um,
that's what I think makes this race so interesting too, and vastly different from the majority of marathons that we see that are paced. And for most competitors in the field, they only run paced marathons too, because for the majority of the marathoners in the race, they're not at the front of the race for a lot of them that they compete in.
or
So
I'll add an addendum to that that's very important, is they either run paced races, or, and this is what I think might be holding a lot of US runners back, or they run our major marathons that we have in the US of Boston and New York, which are not paced, but
mhm,
they're not competing to win. They're trying to
right,
figure out they're trying to figure out how to get sixth instead of eighth. And it's
right.
like, that's not that's very, very different than trying to figure out how to get to the finish line before anybody else in the race.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these competitors are used to running more miserly, but in order
Yeah,
to in order to win or to place, you're going to have to be aggressive at some point. You're going to have to make big moves because your efforts are not based, or they're not made in order to achieve a certain time, get closer to it. They're made to beat people, and that person will put up a fight. So you have to be aggressive, and when you make your moves, and try and lose them, which is a different way of doing things than most of them are used to.
Yeah, and I think you have to be, well, I would qualify that of like you have to be aggressive at some point, unless you are emphatically better than everyone else in the field. Then
Hmm.
you could run a very bearish, miserly strategy of just running exactly like going gun to tape and just nobody can touch you.
Hmm.
Um, but but we don't have that in the United States right now. We don't have anybody that, and that's getting back to like if Galen Rupp is, somewhat bearish by nature in the marathon, he could do that quite well in the past because he was so much better than any of the other marathoners in the field. Um, but yeah, now that there's so much parity, it it opens the door for, yeah, it necessitates some sort of aggression to get away. And then the funny thing about that is like the collateral damage of people being aggressive to try and win is it then allows the the bears to actually like succeed, maybe because of ill-timed or ill-spent aggression from the bulls.
Well,
uh
speaking of that,
yeah.
yeah, coming back to the miserly bears here, um,
Mhm.
somebody who does that very well and has proven to do that, maybe because they know the course so well in Boston. Uh, I feel like Scott Fauble is the quintessential miserly bear.
Yeah, I would say on the men's side, when thinking about this, I'm like Scott Fauble is the miserly bear and Des Linden are kind of a miserly bear, and I think Des, sadly speaking, might not be a prime contender here,
We'll
but
see.
in certain past, yeah, we don't know. I don't want to. It's always never good to count the tried and true out. But anyways, yeah, Scott, I think when we think about it, and that's where Scott's path to making this team, I think is really interesting. I think if he, I, it'd be really cool to see him put in a position where he has to be aggressive late in a race, um, or I mean, I think he's ready to be aggressive early in a race, but I don't even know if he would, if he, if it's like a pack goes out in 62 30, no, pack's not going to go out 63. If they go on 63, or 60, 63 30 or something like that. I don't know. I don't quite know if that would happen, but even if they did, would Scott go with him? Or would he be a tried and true miserly bear of like, nope, I know what I can run and I'm going to like ride that. Um, I don't
Well, I
know.
think
What would be cool to see is late in the race if everyone's run within themselves, or if he's run within himself and he's still there at the end, if he has to be aggressive and take risks. I would really like to see that. I would like to see that side of Scott.
I would like to see that too, and I think that brings us to the nature of this course too, because every marathon course is different, and there's been a lot of talk about the weather at this point, but the course itself, we've looked at it, and there's I think 24 90-degree turns. It's a loop course, so
Mhm.
you're going over and over. I think there's three loops and then a little add-on. Um,
Mhm.
but there's three U-turns in the
Mhm.
race. Relatively flat because Florida is pancake flat. I remember a story when they were building Disney World there, or I heard a story when they were building Disney World because that was before I was around. But you could see Sleeping Beauty's castle for miles and miles and miles because it is so flat, and then it's also swampland too, so they built the Magic Kingdom raised 10 feet so that it
Mhm.
wouldn't sink into the swamp. So Sleeping Beauty's castle just looks enormous compared to everything around it, but it's a spire chase for this race. hear
There
it
are
then.
there are so many metaphors
There are.
layered
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. There's a lot of them.
A lot
But
to unpack about Sleeping Beauty's castle being just above the flat swamp of Florida. um,
rising above, a
yeah,
beacon of hope.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, with all of the turns, you pointed out something that the bears will be able to see the bulls,
hmm
and
And the bulls will be able to see the bulls. Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Uh, yeah, I think the U-turns are a critical component of this, or these out and back kind of hairpin things. Um, because when we think of bears and bulls, if bulls are inherently making a lot of, I would say, decisions based on the field and based on other racers, um, they can see the cards. Like there, this is it takes a game of poker and kind of takes, you can fake it when you're running and like try and look in control, but at some point, you can read, there are tells on athletes, and you can read how an athlete is doing. The term we might use for that is like, um their physiognomy.
what
So
is
it's,
that?
yeah, it's like it's the general, like what and this is more broadly speaking, but like what a person's face communicates about their like emotional state and their physical state. So like what somebody's appearance communicates about their well-being. Um, and so I think in running, you absolutely can do that, where you can see how an athlete is, not just how they're moving over the ground, and but just how their condition is. So, anyways, when you have a U-turn, you get a view of, whether you're out in front and then you're going by the people behind you, you get to see them, but also the people behind you get to see you. You get to see them front on, and yeah, again, how they're moving. And so I think why this is so important, especially when we think bulls versus bears, is like, a bull making an aggressive move, the field, both the bulls and the bears, can see their cards. They can see, you can get a sense of, is this for real? Should I take this seriously? And so it really kind of, I think it neuters the bulls a little bit. Um, in some respect, it could, though, I would say the second order effect of that could be that it gives fire to bulls that are waiting to make moves, or gives them ammo to make all that, it's like more information. Um, but yeah, critically, it allows athletes to see and read each other. So you can, I think um yeah, maybe negatively impacts the bulls a little bit.
Hmm.
um or at least negatively impacts the big spending bulls. um
Sure.
because if they're making one big aggressive move, the rest of the field can have better information to act on it on a shorter time scale. So think of like when Meb won Boston or New York, both of those were cases where he got away from the field and they just didn't take him seriously. Whereas had those courses had hairpins on them and the whole field could see them, they probably would have acted much earlier and that move would have not stuck. And so this is, I think, a case where the field, at three different points in the race, they're going to get not just information of, certainly how far ahead somebody is, but really how that person is moving. It's going to tell them, should alarm bells go off and I need to answer to this, or do I see blood and, this person's coming back? Good chance for me to either sit in or make another move or do something. So I think the hairpins kind of neuter some of the big spending a little bit if the person, um yeah, is not ready. But on the other side, um if they make a move that's for real, it probably will force everybody else to show their cards early, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the case of in past trials where Rupp made a long protracted move, say at mile 16 or whatever. Um, the rest of the field probably would have seen that, and it would have not appeared that he was coming back, and it would have kind of forced everybody else to start chasing or start making things happen. And the same thing goes down the list of second and third place, because the cool thing about the trials is that as much as there's a race to win it, it's really a race for the top three. So I mean, you could have a case where, and this is actually what happened in the 2020 trials on the men's side, where like the winner was decided very early once Rupp made that move, but then it became a very dramatic race for second and third. So again, it kind of all feeds into that idea of I would say it would kind of has the potential to perhaps, I would say it would accelerate the effect of one way or the other of a bullish move, where it would either really allow it to stick or kind of allow people to shut it down quickly. Yeah.
So the miserly bulls might be okay, but because a big spending bull is probably dealing with depleting assets the rest of the way, they could be in big trouble here.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think it negatively affects a big spending bull, whereas it might be beneficial for a big spending bear. Um,
Mm.
uh, and then the other piece to that is the actual turns. So you said 24 90-degree turns. That's actually, when you think about it, I don't think that's out of line from a big city marathon. I think Chicago, Berlin, I think they have on the order maybe 30-ish turns.
Okay.
I would say a U-turn, a 90-degree turn is um, worse, or not 90-degree, 180-degree turn is like much, 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 much worse than a um, than a 90-degree turn. But the effect that a lot of turns can have on a race is it can make it a little bit more staccato, where it's like you have to slow down, speed up, slow down, speed up. So that can take a bear out of their rhythm a little bit. But I think that number, if that's the total number in the race, um, that's not that much to have that effect. So I think the biggest effect will be that hairpin that they hit 3 times.
Okay. And let's talk about the weather here for a little bit, because it's been such a topic of discussion, and moving the start
Yeah.
time back or forward, sorry, 2 hours. Um, I'm on the West Coast, so it'll be pretty early for me, regardless of when it when it starts. But we will be out there, so that'll be fun. Um, but yes, the weather is supposed to be around 60 degrees at the start, I saw,
Mm-hmm.
and then right now warming up to 67 2 hours
Mm-hmm.
later. So
Yeah.
it's getting a little warmer, and I think the sun will be beaten down. I don't imagine it'll be super overcast there, but let's talk about the dew point a little bit, because that's something that I don't really know about. And when we were at CIM this last year, it was a topic of discussion because the temperature was about the same as it's always been, but it felt a tiny bit more humid than normal, and people were talking about how they were really sweaty during the race, more so than normal. So speak on that for a little bit. How does that affect runners?
Yeah, so you have, obviously the absolute temperature is huge. That I would say 60 degrees at the start, finishing high 60s, say 67, 68, 69, is warmer than what we would want for ideal marathon conditions. Not oppressive. But yeah, you have, I would say, two big things that affect your ability to thermoregulate when you're running. And thermoregulate means obviously managing the heat and not going, quote unquote overheating and hyperthermic. So you have the absolute temperature, but then yeah, you also have the dew point, which then those two interact to get you your relative humidity. Um, but so if the dew point is the same, the dew point, I guess for anyone listening there doesn't know, is the temperature at which temperature at which water will condense in the ambient air, or it will go from essentially its gaseous form, vapor, into liquid. Um, and so if the dew point is the same temperature is the ambient temperature, you would have 100% humidity, and it would mean that water can then condense on that. And the converse of that is that it means that water will not, at say just at general conditions temperature, will not evaporate into the air.
Which
The
is what you
reason
want.
the reason this is a huge problem for runners is our dominant cooling mechanism is what we call evaporative cooling, where we are literally evaporating sweat off of our skin into the air. And the reason that that's so powerful, and this is one of our like evolutionary superpowers. It's probably one of the couple things that have allowed us to become a dominant species, is basically this ability to very efficiently cool our bodies. Other animals have different mechanisms for doing it that's not as efficient as this. But what happens is, as soon as a water droplet, and it happens on, I would say, smaller molecular scale than this, but if we just conceptualize a water droplet turning from a droplet on your skin into gas in the air, the process of doing that pulls out a bunch of energy. And so essentially the water, in the process of going to a droplet to a gas off your skin, it requires activation energy to do that and overcome that kind of thermodynamic gradient. And so that process just pulls a lot of heat out of your system. So the act of basically evaporating water off your body is the dominant thing that cools us down. So the reason why dew point becomes important is the higher and higher the dew point means and the closer and closer the dew point is to the ambient temperature, essentially the less and less thermodynamic bandwidth you have to evaporate water off your body, the harder and harder it becomes to get that water from being liquid into gas in the air. When it's a really, really low dew point and it's very essentially it's very favorable for water to go into the air. Yeah, it's very easy to evaporate water off your body in sweat. So that's why if you're in the desert and it's 70 degrees, but the dew point is like, say, 40 degrees, 35, 40 degrees or something like that, which is, I'm based in Colorado Springs here, and that's what it typically is. It can be very hot outside, but the dew point is very low, which means the relative humidity is very low. There's very low water in the air. So it's very, 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 very easy for your body to cool itself and thermoregulate. As you push that dew point higher and higher and higher, basically it gets challenging for two reasons. One, because it gets closer to the actual ambient temperature, which means that the air becomes saturated with water. So it's harder to evaporate it off. But the other reason it's important is because it also goes higher and higher and higher relative to your body's core temperature. So if our bodies sit at around 98 degrees, the higher and higher we go on that dew point, if our body is operating at a certain temperature, then that means that essentially that gradient that we're working on between our skin and the ambient temperature, or internal body and the ambient temperature, is getting tighter and tighter. So all in all, it just gets harder and harder and harder to use that superpower of ours. And the problem with that is, as soon as it becomes harder to evaporate water off our body, the water stays on our body. And then it essentially forms an insulative layer. So it's kind of this like double whammy. So it becomes easy to overheat. And to further complicate things, the reason why it's so much more important in the marathon versus, the shorter and shorter you go in events, the less and less important this becomes. It's still critically important in, say, a 10K or a 5K, but not quite to the level of the marathon, because the marathon, if you are essentially creating more heat than you are able to lose and offload, because you're playing this out over 2 hours, 2.5 hours, as the bears know very well, like those, even those small gains, they multiply over time and really, really, really can spiral out of control. So things get much more extreme in the marathon.
So, who does this favor then? Who benefits, or who? I would say, who does this hurt the most?
Yeah, I think heat stress, and if in this case, especially if it's humidity, um, hurts the bulls the most. And that's because, heat, we can think of in running, heat is a waste product in our bodies. It's a byproduct of muscular activity, and it you would make the case it is the dominant waste product in our body. Because essentially every muscular contraction that is trying to move us forward, you know, if 25% of that energy goes to forward motion, 75-80% of it is just lost as heat. So we're generating lots and lots of heat, and it's our primary function to just offload that heat. The bulls, by nature of their strategies and behaviors, are essentially doing things they're making aggressive moves, as we talked about. And the reason this is problematic is a lot of these waste products in our bodies are, what we call nonlinear, that a little bit causes, a little bit of an outcome, and a little bit more causes a lot more, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
running, you know, just a little bit above as maybe your kind of steady state or flat line, you get concomitantly more waste associated with that. I think any runner would know this if they think about lactate, or like those products of those waste products of or shouldn't call it a waste product, the byproducts of really intense exercise. It's like if you go 10 seconds per mile faster and faster and faster, at some point those 10-second increments become dramatically harder. Same
Hmm.
thing with heat in our body, with generating that amount of heat. So if the bulls are inherently making these aggressive moves that cause them to spend a little bit more, we can think about heat as essentially heat turns up the interest rates quite a bit.
Okay.
Um, so if every purchase they're making, or every asset, if it comes with this price tag, they're incurring a lot more interest in the heat that they have to make up with. And so if you think of think of a runner that's surging, backing off, surging, backing off, surging, backing off. When you do that, they surge. It's like you could think of generating more heat, back off, their body has to clear it. Surging in the heat, or in an ambient hot environment, when they do that and they back off, they just can't clear it as much. So if they make it again, they have again those higher interest rates. They're carrying more debt going into it. And so I think hot conditions definitely negatively affect the bulls.
Okay.
Now, I would say the corollary to that, though, or the thing that's concomitant with that, maybe, is that the bulls might be the ones that are psychologically best suited to handle the
Mm.
oppression of heat. Um, and so this is where they may be the best suited to deal with that level of variable discomfort. Um, it's just their performance, or the realization of their strategies and their performances might incur too great of a cost on them. So then it becomes, if the bulls can become a bit more bearish in the heat, that's going to be, that might set them up for success.
Mm.
Um,
So it seems like the race. Well, I looked at what the dew point is supposed to be too on race day, and it says 60 to 67 is the ambient temperature, uh,
mhm.
47 to 45 dew point.
Yeah, and that's actually not high.
Hmm.
so so all of this talk about the heat, it may actually not be that humid, which I think would be very humidity. Heat and humidity are kind of, I would say humidity is like a class of heat stress, where humidity is much harder to deal with than just outright ambient heat. So if it's hot and somewhat dry, or at least hot and not humid, that's going to be much, much better, especially if an athlete has done adequate heat preparation. If you've done adequate heat acclimation or acclimatization, you're not going to run as fast as you absolutely could on that day, but you could come pretty close if it's dry heat and not extreme dry heat. So if we're talking somewhat, non-humid, dryish heat of the 60s to high 60s, if an athlete's prepared, done a lot of heat work, that's actually not going to negatively affect them too much. Um, so, so I think that humidity is much, much lower than I would say what we expected, which is a good thing for maybe a good thing for the Bulls. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah, it seems like it's leveling the playing field a bit more from what we assumed might be a Bears day in Orlando. But that's the thing, you
yeah,
never know too. Like I'm really excited to see how this plays out, so we can see who kind of prevailed using what tactics, bearish or bullish, and big spending or miserly, and who comes out on top. Because I remember in 2020, everyone said that the times would be slower. They said on the men's side, because the course is so hilly and difficult, 212 would win that race. And 20 Galen ran 209 and negative split
yeah.
big time and won that race. 105 first half and 103 second half. So that's the thing. This is where stars are made. This is where champions are made. And
Yeah.
we'll see who writes the story on Saturday. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. And I think what I'm most excited about is to see if anybody breaks their archetype to to I would say to
Yes.
success or failure, but I would love to see, gave the example of Scott Fauble, of like I would love to see some variable dynamic aggression of him, especially late in the race, to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm
I would
curious to
say,
see if yeah.
yeah, and that's maybe the most exciting thing in sports for me, because we do all of this to lay out the different boxes for athletes, and we're putting them in boxes, and athletes are probably thinking like, oh, that's not me. Like I'm an all rounder. I can do anything, and that's fair. Maybe you can. And none of this is to say that the athlete is going to race this certain way. One of the most exciting things in sports is when an athlete breaks archetype and they do something unpredictable in order to achieve a different outcome for themselves. And like the old rope-a-dope and go back to, Ali backs
Yeah.
himself into a corner instead of coming out dancing, and he just lets himself be hit and then comes out swinging in the end.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's
I think if we see any of the molds broken, that'll be great. But also at the same level, I think there seems to be a lot of parity in both fields. At
mhm.
least no, we don't have one athlete that just is clearly, you know, we don't have one athlete that truly could be a miserly bear and just go out and slam it. I think especially on the men's race. The men's race is like very, very flat at the top.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so I think are molds broken, or are they entrenched to good effect? Either way, I think we'll see, you know, a star will be born somewhere for
Yeah.
sure.
We don't know who they're going to be now, but in the history books, we'll look back and see their names there forever. So I think that's pretty exciting to see. Well, the names that we'll come across first, second, and third on Saturday will define the era, the Olympic cycle that lasts 4 years.
Yeah.
All
And then
right.
Paris is the Paris course is opposite of this.
Well,
So
we'll get to that.
we'll get to
We've got
that.
plenty of time.
Yeah.
But Bernsey, it's been great chatting with you. Thank you for all of your knowledge and sharing that with us. Let's do it again sometime.
Be my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's always a joy to talk track with you.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it many more times. All right. And where will
Agreed.
you be watching on Saturday?
When or where?
Where?
Where? Here in Colorado Springs. I think I'm going to go over to my friend named Alex Nichols. He's the coach of the Colorado College Tigers here, cross country and track coach. Their Division III school. He's also a seasoned, very elite trail runner, so he's kind of introduced me to that world here. He's a man of many belt buckles.
Nice.
So he and I will watch it together. Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah,
So
we'll be courtside in Orlando, so if anybody listening sees us there, come on up, say hi, give us a high five. We love making friends, and it's great to meet people in the track and running community. But until next time, thanks, Burnsy. Enjoy the races.